Hi everyone, so today we're going to have a look at social, moral, ethical issues for the second year revision. So just a recap of what you need to know is what social means, what moral means, what ethical means, how and why we need to consider different cultures. Just remember that this topic is more about understanding real life applications of how companies can address these issues, so it's not so much the bare facts of what I'm showing you, it's just showing you some examples and then hopefully you can use that yourself to start looking at other examples that you can know and refer back to when it comes to your exam as well. So, first of all, social issues. So, that can include things like environment, health, poverty, discrimination, unemployment, that type of thing. Moral and ethical issues. That's related more to people's beliefs, such as what they believe is right and wrong, whether you should do things or you shouldn't do things, that type of thing. So, some companies are very aware of their responsibilities and do a lot to maintain balance. There's a thing called corporate social responsibility, which is a self-regulatory scheme, which gives companies a framework, basically sets out a framework of like making sure people can be responsible. A couple of companies, like I say, are really, really good. Lego is a really good one. WWF, which is the World Wildlife Foundation, not the wrestling company. And then like Disney, they are known as being quite good. So Lego has set a target of having 100% renewable energy capacity. And they've set a target of using sustainable raw materials as an alternative to oil by 2030. So Lego no longer being made from oil-based plastics. Disney also have a really good reputation as they encourage workers to do a lot of charity work. And they've provided significant support in natural disaster situations, in terms of like shelter and that type of thing. So, the military. Obviously, they're criticised quite a lot for having a negative effect on the environment and the world due to conflict. They may go into certain areas. Obviously, there is warfare. Obviously, that involves death of people, sadly. But it also can have a huge negative effect on the environment around them because they've had to dig out camps and that sort of thing. So there is a lot of bad connotations with the military. However, without the military, there's a lot of things we wouldn't have. So things like having radar technology, the EpiPen, GPS, penicillin, drones, jet engines, nylon, all those things have been developed by the military or for the military in combat, and once they've been used, they then work their way into modern society. So things like EpiPens, obviously, if anyone's got a serious allergy to like nuts or that type of thing, without an EpiPen, you wouldn't be around because that actually stops you from like dying. Okay, so yes, the military does have this negative connotation to it, but actually they do a lot of good as well. So a lot of things out there. Moral of the story is you can't please all the people all of the time, because some people go, "Oh, military bad, boo hoo hoo," but actually they have done some good. So sustainable materials and ethical production methods. So at the moment we still rely really heavily on finite materials, so fossil fuels like coal, oil, gas. All right, but some countries are looking at more sustainable sources. For example, like the FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, where they do the whole thing of sustainable rainforest, where cut down a tree to use it, but then we're going to plant 3 more, that type of thing. Some more suitable materials being used more regularly, like things like PLA, which is a biobatch polymer, which is a starch-based plastic. And anyone that's into 3D printing, PLA is a very, very common material used in 3D printing, and there's no oil in that at all. It's a very, very good sustainable material. Metal production is considered very, very bad due to the fact that extracting the ore requires a lot of mining and does do a lot of damage to the environment and the landscape that it's in. It can also be dangerous when mines collapse. There have been examples of dams busting due to mining and killing most people in a town in Brazil in 2015. There were accusations that safety standards had not been met, so these were like headlines taken from British newspapers, so the Guardian and the BBC. Obviously, aside from the fact that it ruined the landscape, a dam broke and it killed thousands of people. And there are still lawsuits going on to this day because they're saying, well, you didn't meet all these safety standards and that's resulted in these people's deaths. Obviously, as a company, if you're going into someone's country and using the space, you should be trying to make it as safe as physically possible. Conditions for workers. So some companies are coming to scrutiny for the conditions they have for their workers. So there was a factory in China where several workers committed suicide due to stressful conditions. This was an Apple factory. So again, this is taken from The Guardian, I think it is. So very, very poor living conditions, weren't paid very well, a very stressful environment, and quite a few workers started to sadly take their own lives, and then Apple were just sort of okay with it until it came out and suddenly they said, "Oh no, we are sorry." Like, well, you're only sorry because you got found out. So I know sometimes it sounds like I rag on Apple quite a bit, but they do have quite loose morals. Okay, so there was as well in 1984 the Union Carbide plant in India. So they suffered a leak of methyl isocyanate, which results in the death of thousands of people in the plant, and then also not just the plant but the surrounding towns. So this has been subject to a huge amount of controversy and argument, because basically having a plant near a densely populated area made the situation much, much worse than it could have been if it was a lot further afield. And again, there are suggestions that safety regulations weren't met. We didn't meet those safety standards that were needed to make sure that it was safe. So I've got no article statistic to go for the next one, but obviously we can take something like COVID, okay, and in Wuhan, and okay, there are loads of conspiracy theories about it was done on purpose or it was weaponized or whatever that may be, and who knows? We may never find out. But one of the arguments certainly that will come out of it later on when this all dies down is, well, if it was a leak and it was an accident, clearly safety regulations were not in place properly to ensure that that didn't happen. Okay, so that's a very, very topical one. Obviously, we don't have enough information, but you can assume, much like with the disasters that have happened previously, companies will be in trouble, there will be fines, there will be regulations set in place to ensure that this doesn't happen again. So cultural acceptance and non-offensive products. So we talked about it in the marketing theory that we've done previously, but now that we're living in what's called a global market, it's important to be aware of different cultures and different beliefs to try and not offend anyone or upset anyone, otherwise you're not going to be very successful. So United Airlines, which is a very, very nice high-end airline, decided to hand out a white flower to first-class passengers from Hong Kong. So they were doing their first transatlantic flight to Hong Kong to symbolise it, like to promote it. They gave white flowers to their first-class passengers, going, "Oh, well done, welcome to first class," that type of thing. Not realising that in Hong Kong, white symbolises death and bad luck. So not really something you want to be handing to people when they're just about to get on a plane. And one of my personal favourites is there was a sports clothing brand, and still exists, that's very popular in Australia and India. They tried to launch the same product in the UK. Unfortunately, that brand is called Spunk. Now, Spunk means something very, very different in Australia and India than what it does in England. And because someone didn't do their research, wasn't that popular in England. I can't imagine why people didn't want Spunk all over their t-shirts or their clothing. So, something to think about. So, products that are inclusive. So, as a designer and as a company that produce products, we're all aiming to make products that can be used as a wide range of people as possible. So we've talked about this before in inclusive design, that type of thing. There are far more people that require consideration than people realise, okay? Because that could be people with limited mobility, arthritis, some types of disabilities, poor eyesight. So there's a huge variety of people that it could affect. But examples of this happening are things like wider doors for wheelchairs in new houses, good grip utensils, accessibility on public transport, things like having braille, like ramps, that sorts of things, pedestrian crossings where you got like little bumps on the ground so people with visual impairments can see, or not see, sorry, can feel where the crossings are, the fact that it beeps and then it beeps faster when it's about to stop. Underneath the actual box that you can press, there's like a little spinner, and it will stop when it's time to go. So all those things are built into modern society to be as inclusive as possible, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to alienate people, because people that are already feeling a little bit outcast because they're different, because no one wants to feel different, everyone wants to feel included. If you're already feeling different because you are different, and then you've got to get different products because the other ones aren't made for you, it's going to make you feel worse. So you're trying to eliminate that sense of isolation. So, designs to help with social problems. So, obviously, social problems, the most common things are like with litter, and how can you solve problems to help with this, particularly in like densely populated cities where litter is terrible. Places like London, Manchester, Liverpool, it's a lot worse than it is in certain places. And then, so how can you design things to sort of like encourage that, and how do you encourage like younger people to not litter? So then you can look at different designs like bins and that sort of thing. And then accidents with young drivers. Sadly, a lot of young drivers, there's more deaths in young drivers than there are in older drivers, and that's where you had the design and the use of black box devices So they actually monitor driving data like your speed, braking time, that type of thing. And insurance companies can make it so they won't give you cover unless you have one of these installed on your car and they can see that you're a safe driver. So all these sorts of things are trying to encourage you to be safer, encourage you to look after your area more, and that type of thing. So poverty and well-being. So United Nations, so they've got these articles for like the human rights. So the first, like Article 25, is everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care. Unfortunately, some of the basic human rights remain elusive to many because of the country they live in. Obviously, we are very lucky. We live in England. We are in a developed country. We have a lot of basic human rights and more. We live very comfortably. But there are a lot of other countries where people just happen to be born in a certain country where some of these human rights aren't upheld because of where they live. So there are some designers or some companies that have made products and services to sort of help. So Trevor Bayliss, very famous for doing the wind-up radio. So basically aware of unavailability of batteries or power sources in Africa, and then the lack of information being received from broadcasts about issues such like AIDS, because there was quite a large AIDS pandemic in Africa. So Trevor Bayliss, he developed a wind-up clock radio that has sold millions around the world. So you literally, like just a winch, you wind it all up, charges the battery, or what would be a battery, so charges up a cell that gives it power, and then it would then play broadcast, play radio, that type of thing. So you don't need to have an electrical source to run it, just have this winch and you just keep winding up. And obviously you have to keep doing it more and more to make it work, but it eliminated that need to have an electrical source. So you've also got things like crowdfunding, so this is where individuals can pledge money online to projects they'd like to support, much like Kickstarter, that type of thing. So another example, like with the Trevor Bayliss wind-up radio, is you got the gravity light. So this would store up energy. So you pull the light up high, and then as it pulls down with the weight, that will then charge the light, and it would work. So this is targeted towards poorer families in Kenya, who often they have to spend 30% of their income on kerosene fuels and lamps. So the gravity lamp gives out 5 times more light than the typical kerosene lamp, and is much safer because kerosene is a very, very flammable liquid that can cause houses to go up in flames. So Yanko is an online design blog, and they held a competition to encourage designers to work on solutions to problems faced by the poor. Top entries include things like rainwater harvesting systems, shelters that have been used by the homeless, mobile storage units to facilitate education programs in developing countries. So this is just how design companies and designers, they can all encourage us trying to make this world a better place. It's not necessarily about just trying to make the prettiest thing because I'm rich and I want to have loads of nice things in my house. Actually, how can you make the world a better place? Yeah, we've all got to live here. I know this sounds quite preachy, but we all have got to live here. We're all human. We should be trying to make everyone's time here as enjoyable as possible. So you then got obviously things like in medical care. So you got things like 3D printing and becoming huge. Then you got things like used quite a lot in medical care. So scaffolding, to like bones. You can get synthetic skin. You can make medical equipment. You can make prosthetics. You can have skull repair from people that like particularly injuries like car injuries, bike injuries, people from war, where you can actually rebuild part of their skull. You got things like MRI scanners, CT scanners, those type of things. You've also got artificial organs. So they've been around for quite a long time, like 1982, but they've constantly developed now, so you can pretty much, like, they've started to try and like 3D print organic matter, so or 3D print hearts, kidneys, livers, those types of things. One problem with that is it's been patented, so it can be very expensive because someone's got the technology for it. And then there are issues around ethical considerations for that going, well, there are some arguments going, well, if it's someone's time to die, it's someone's time to die, which can seem quite harsh, but there's an argument for that. So maybe it's like, okay, well, it's just your time. When really you're prolonging the life and really you shouldn't be living as long. Even though I've got stem cells, now I don't know if anyone knows, if you do biology, you might know quite a lot about it. So stem cells are fetuses, or like unborn fetuses, that are blank cells, and if you put it next to, I'm butchering this because I am no way a medical professional at all, in case you haven't noticed, but stem cells, they're blank cells that basically if you put it next to another cell, it will reproduce it and make a healthier cell of it. And it's been shown to work, but again, it does have very, very strong ethical considerations either way. Some people again are saying it's very good, like highly religious people can say it's very against God, it's not ethical at all, and some people are saying it's groundbreaking, it's saving lives, it can cure cancer potentially, like all these possible things. So obviously everyone holds their own beliefs and what offends me might not offend you. What I believe in, you might not believe in, and that's absolutely fine because everyone's completely entitled to their opinion. But there is always going to be the other side to what you're saying. So you may think, oh, this is fantastic, it's going to save lives, but someone might say, well, actually, you shouldn't be doing that. I don't think that's right. And it's healthy to have that argument. Okay, like I said at the beginning of this with the military, you can't please all the people all the time. You shouldn't be aiming to, because while trying to do that, you're not really going to achieve anything. So it's normal to have opposition. Okay, I mean, the extreme case, think of it of like people fighting in YouTube channels, that sort of thing. Like people are going to argue no matter what the case is. But that's not a reason to then stop doing whatever you're doing. Okay. So a few other examples of like companies and things that have done things to try and help developing worlds or improve the world around them. So you got a company called Sun Water. So that's an Israeli company. So they've developed a water distillation equipment that converts water, like contaminated water, into drinking water. So that's done with solar power. Obviously, if it's in countries where there's no clean water and it's a very hot climate, great drinking water. IKEA, they have a flat pack better shelter, which is used in locations like Iraq, Ethiopia, Macedonia. So that can be built without tools and sleep 5 people. So it's really, really cheap accommodation. Medical care, so the UN has provided hospitaners and maternitainers, which is basically shipping containers that have like little hospital equipment built in, so you can get healthcare to anywhere around the world. You've got clothing designers like Angela Luna, who's American, that has made clothing that's kind of like a cape-like coat, but actually going to be turned into a small tent. You then got fair trade, that obviously they set up and protect like farmers and producers to get fair prices, so that they're not underpaid, so they can get better living and then working conditions as well. So, social, moral, ethical. There's a huge amount to cover. It's all about what's considered right, what's considered wrong, and obviously that is on a scale that's going to be different for everyone. The best thing is to make sure that you've got examples and real life examples that you can refer to in exam papers. Okay, so we're going to have a look at some questions now. Like I say, it'll probably be a little bit longer mark ones because it's your opinion, so it's going to ask you to discuss and analyse that sort of thing. So, question number 1. Using specific examples, evaluate the social, moral and ethical impact of mobile technology on society over the last 30 years. So 12 marks, long mark answer, so you need a conclusion. So really you're after 6 points with evidence for both positive and negatives about mobile technology. Pause the video, give yourself 12 minutes, have a go answering. So there are so many things that you can talk about here, positive and negative. So obviously improved communication, good signals like Bluetooth, 3G, 4G and 5G. In terms of like improved safety for individuals walking home, so you know that like you can talk to people to make sure that they're safe. But then also there's the idea that you can be tracked. Increased online access, which is great because then you've got like all the information that you can have on the fingertips. So you can just find information out, you can just Google it, you can just find things out. But the other side of that is that people then get addicted to it because people are on their phone a lot. Increased risk of cyberbullying, things like social media. So it happens a huge amount and it's in your pocket a lot. There's other things like cybercrime, so people having their bank accounts hacked become a lot more prevalent. Reduced literacy skills. You might not notice this, but me as a teacher, people now write in text speak quite a bit without realising it because they're just used to doing shorthand on text, so it definitely does have an effect on literacy skills. People becoming a lot more reliant on technology as opposed to people kind of losing that social interaction ability, so they can't really hold a conversation in person because they're so used to being behind a screen. So things like reduction in exercise because people are becoming a lot less active. Positives again being that on your phone now you've got things like you've got your music player, you've got video, you've got calls, you've got everything, so you don't need to carry 3 or 4 different things in your pocket now. It's all done there, so it's very good. Peer pressure, things like social media having a lot of pressure on people. Unfortunately, there's been rises in suicide, particularly with teenage girls, because of pressures on things like Instagram, things like grooming. There's been a lot more prevalent since social media's come in. Increase in navigation systems, another positive, which means that you can make sure, like GPS, so everyone uses their GPS now on their phone, so it's great, so you make sure you're a lot less likely to get lost. So there are huge amounts of positives and negatives, so we're only after 6. And remember, this is about your opinion informing pros and cons. Okay, it doesn't matter if you're like all for mobile technology, but you got to show the other side of what are the negatives that could go with it as well. Next question: discuss the social, moral, ethical issues facing a product designer today. So 12 marks. So again, long mark question. So you need a complete conclusion. 6 points with an explanation gets you 12 marks, and then you're assessed on SPAG as well. So remember, you can't get the same mark twice. So if you mention something, you don't get another mark for bring it up again because you've already had the marks for it. So 12 marks. Pause the video, have a go at answering it, and we'll go for the answers. So development products that are culturally acceptable, so they won't offend different people like race, gender, religion, disability, that sort of thing. Things like child labour, safe working conditions, understanding disposal of products, making sure that things can be recycled, selection of materials, product longevity, making sure it can be repaired so it's not just thrown away, harming of wildlife and environment because you're getting rid of forestry for factories, inclusive design, safety legislation, all sorts of things that you can talk about. You only need 6 of them and a little bit of explanation that goes with it as well. So that is social, moral, ethical issues. If you've got any questions, send me a message on Teams or via email and I'll get back to you.